Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar Strategies to Support E-Learning at Home. My name is Raul Garcia. I am a behavioral resource specialist. Before I get started, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about myself. I was a behavior specialist at various schools in our district for over 13 or so years. Previous to that, I also taught in elementary grades, and more recently I am serving as a behavioral resource specialist in the district office where I support various schools with behavior needs. I want to thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join me in this webinar. My objective today is to be able to provide you with some ideas, some strategies that will hopefully help you and your child be successful while learning from school, away from school. And I know that this is a timely subject, being that there are some kiddos that are still working at home, but I also want to say and point out that the information that is shared in this presentation is applicable to students that are learning while in brick and mortar, attending school, because there are some practices that are good and beneficial to all student learnings in different settings. So it's broken down into 5 steps. This presentation again aims to just give you some of the foundational things that you may or may not have in place at the moment that research says enhances the ability to have a good learning environment. From the presentation, I will tell you now there are going to be maybe 2 sections, number 2, the step 2, and step 5, that will require a little bit more explanation from my part. Some of the other steps are easier to understand and to implement, and so I'll take some time and do my best at making sure that those 2 steps certainly have more explanation so that you have a good understanding of what it is that it is asking you to do. The steps are the following: creating a space for learning, developing expectation matrix for your home, creating a schedule, using reinforcement systems, and also being able to plan accordingly so that if your child is not engaged in the activity, you know how to respond without any hiccups. So the first, step 1, as you can see in the picture here, we want to make sure that we are doing our best to create an environment for our kids to be able to succeed. And so to do that, there are some pointers here of things you want to think about, such as having an area where your child is able to get all the materials he or she needs, easily accessible to them. You don't want them, as the lesson starts with your child's teacher, to have to pause for a second to go find things and then waste some precious time. So having an area or in your home where they have access to all their materials would be very beneficial. Or even in that one area, having a space, maybe a cup like in the picture where all the writing utensils are there, scissors if they may need that, their folders or books, whatever have you. Think about the sitting. If you think about it, we are asking kids to, some kids anyways, to remain seated facing a computer screen much longer than they're accustomed to. Even though in the classrooms they get to sit and they have their own desk, the chances are that they are or were previously to COVID moving a lot more than when they're at home facing their teacher through a computer screen in e-learning. So it's important that the sitting is comfortable so they are not having any aches. I myself have been having some back problems lately, and I think I contributed to the amount of time that I'm sitting now as opposed to moving when I used to be at the school sites. So something to think about. Furniture that is included in a space for learning would mean having a desk of some sort or somewhere that maybe has a flat surface where your child can write or do some reading, and it's not gonna cause any problems. If you are fortunate to have an office in your home, and that's fantastic, because that would be an ideal place to do the e-learning. But if you don't, like myself, I don't have an office, we have some space in other rooms around the house, then just making sure there's a desk maybe, or some kind of flat surface, as I mentioned earlier, where they can put their notebooks and write, or their laptops. when I was a kid, we had little trays where we kept our TV dinners, and those would be also some examples of things you can use to for writing purposes. The lighting, whether it's natural or artificial, you want plenty of light so there's no straining of the eyes. While I'm on that topic, I'll say that it's something to consider having for your children the lens, the glasses they sell nowadays with the blue light protective lens, because staring into the screen may be creating some damage in their eyes, and so you want to make sure you protect them. And then designating this area to be away from any kind of distractions when at all possible. So maybe this is a room or an area that is away from other siblings, if there are any, or other people, or things like a radio or a TV. When I was first dealing with e-learning with my own two children, I had to make sure that their space for learning was away from where I was, because they were intrigued and always wanting to interfere or like join my conversations for work. And so then you want to make sure that there are no distractions if at all possible. The second step that I have here is developing expectations matrix. So some of you may not be familiar with this. If you've been to a classroom or a school, whether primary or middle or high, it's likely that you've seen this in some shape or form. This is basically a form that's created, or a poster, as a banner, where the expectations are listed for how the school believes the children or their students should behave, and it details in writing again what exactly the kids should demonstrate. So these are expectations or behaviors that, as a whole, the staff together with administration have decided that they are universal and they're applicable to all settings. So when we are talking about creating these expectation metrics for the home, you're doing exactly the same thing as these schools have done, where you're saying, okay, for our home during this time of e-learning, we want to make sure that we're clear on what it is that you as a student is going to do while learning, the type of behavior you want to see. This does not have to be limited to a learning expectation of as far as behavior goes. It could be, as if you can see here, the second bullet, identifying what your core values are, what it is that you as a family member think is valuable and important for your kiddos to demonstrate, and utilizing those. So respect, kindness, and responsibility are pretty much universal values that most parents, if not all parents, want to instill in their kids. So maybe then creating this matrix using those values so that the kids know exactly what it looks like to be respectful during the morning time, during the afternoon, during the evening, and or in the different areas of your home. And I'll elaborate a little bit on the difference between having the expectations based on settings of your home and or based on times of the day. Defining the expectations, critical again and important for your kids to be able to know exactly what you're looking for, and then they can learn to demonstrate that behavior. And then also making sure that they're applicable to any and all areas or settings. Here's some more information on the expectations. I'm not sure that you're going to want to necessarily have these posters up all over your home, but for example, in my home, to this day, it's still up there, even though my girls are back to school. We have expectations that we had created, and we had only one small sheet of paper with the expectations in there, and it's hanging in our kitchen's wall. And we all refer to it in the mornings, and we look at it to remind my girls, when I say we, my wife and I, remind our girls what it is that we were looking for and expecting, because we thought these were the behaviors that they were to demonstrate throughout the day, and especially when they were joining their lessons via their e-learning with their teachers. So if you've got them posted, that's wonderful, but it's maybe not ideal in a home. Reviewing them daily is going to help them to learn it and to remember what it is that you are wanting them to do. And I include here information about family circles later on in the presentation, but that's just a time when maybe you can decide on what the expectations are going to be and what they look like. The way to ensure that your kids have success would be to, of course, reminding them of these expectations. The more the better, because they're more likely to retain that information. And it's especially important to refer to them when your child is demonstrating that expectation. So in the example I gave you here, maybe your expectation in the home includes being safe, and so you have Mike, for example, where you say something like, Mike, thanks for using the knife safely when slicing food. So that by doing this, Mike understands that what he just demonstrated, that behavior of using the knife the proper way, which was listed on what it looks like to be safe with a knife, he's now being encouraged to repeat that, and he's learning and making that connection. In the same way, if your child is not following that expectation, you want to make sure you say something and bring it to their, make them aware of that. And so you can say something like, Fabiola, it's not safe to bounce the ball inside. Please do it outside. And so then if this was an expectation where you had previously said, being safe means we're not throwing balls or bouncing balls because they can break things, then when she does that, you remind her of that expectation. This is nothing new, Fabiola. We've had this, we agreed upon this behavior, and that's how you encourage her to learn better ways to behave. So this is an example of a behavior matrix. And again, something like this is what you might see at schools when you visit campus or in classrooms. Not necessarily the same language, but the matrix, the flow of it. And so the example here are 3 expectation behaviors. They are being respectful, responsible, and safe. And in this example, it talks about the different times of the day rather than different locations of the school. I've seen it both ways. So in this one, if you're doing it for home, then you would have what your morning expectations for your kids are as far as when you're being respectful. What does that look like? And you would write it here. Okay. And the example that they use, it says using a quiet voice until others are awake. Okay. And then you explain, when you're not quiet, you're making noise and you're going to wake up others, and that's not being respectful. Okay, and using kind words, saying good morning, those are using your manners. And so they start to make connections between their behavior, their actions, and the expected behavior, and why they're asked to behave a certain way. And this is a matrix in that you can see how for each of the behaviors there's a tile or a square depending on the time of day and what it is that you're asking them to demonstrate. Okay, this is a good reminder to let you guys know that this information, this presentation will be available on YouTube, so you can refer to it later on and see that in case you wanted to take this information. The behavior matrix template that you're seeing here is basically that. It's empty, it's left for you to use if you want to. This one talks about the expectations of helping out, owning your behavior, and manners count. I'll give you an example. So for getting up, owning your behavior, perhaps this could be something like, you're going to, this is again what would be writing, you set the alarm to wake you up. Okay, so then in my home, if I had that as an expectation, my 2 girls would know that for getting up part of the day, right, in the morning, the beginning, the expected behavior is that they've gotten up themselves with an alarm, either an alarm watch, a clock, whatever have you, but that would be the responsibility, even a cell phone if they have one. And then I can have what owning their behavior looks like for virtual learning, which is maybe you've gotten all your materials, you've set in your space for learning 5 minutes prior to the actual start time. And that's something that you do on your own, right? And so that because of that, you're owning your behavior, you're being in charge of yourself, as opposed to me having to tell you as your father or parent. Okay, and you would do that and fill that out for all these areas. Remember that you can choose to change this or this. It's up to you. These are just examples, okay? The third step is developing a schedule. Some of the things to know about developing a schedule to keep in mind is that you're working from home, or have been, or were at some point during this COVID, and your child is also. So both schedules need to be taken into consideration when you're creating the master schedule for your home, right? So if you have a work schedule that has you logging in and doing some work at a specific time of the day, be mindful of that and keep that in the perspective when you're creating this master schedule. Will include you and your spouse's information if you have one, and your children, and doing your very best to accommodate. It's not easy. It was difficult for my wife and I, including our girls, because my girls, the two girls, have different grade levels. So they had different times that they were logging on for their teachers, and my wife is a teacher, and she was having to do the same thing, log on with her students, as well as I logging on for my work responsibilities, and having a way to coordinate all schedules was challenging. So, but just be mindful of that, and remember that some of the schedules that you're going to try to coordinate with are not necessarily your child's teacher's choosing. It may have been given to them by that teacher's school and administrator, and so sometimes they can't be as flexible as maybe we can, or you may be able to be. Include things like your snacks or lunch and recess. Those are things that are obviously important because they do happen. They're part of the day routine. When your kids were in school, depending on their age group, they would have breaks during their day, and so you want to make sure that you mimic that and you do the same. Here's some things not to forget that will help you. Let the kids, your students, your children, excuse me, have a choice. By having choice, they'll be able to have more say in what's happening and take ownership to be a part of this e-learning experience. I'll talk a little bit more about choice in a moment. Think about the interests that they may have. This is going to make it better and more engaging for them if they're actually finding themselves interested in what they're doing, or preferred activities. Then you're more likely to have them not give you any hard time when it comes to doing the e-learning. And this is going to depend on how creative you can be in creating something and adding something to the schedule that is interesting to them, on top of what they have to do that may not be as interesting. Having activities for them to do to break up the monotony of sitting down facing a computer screen for a prolonged period of time, very important. I know this is a touchy subject, but the electronic device, having them have an opportunity maybe to have these devices available to them, and certainly have access to them at some point of the day. Remember that for most of your kids, if not all, home was not what it is now. As far as they used to view home as the sanctuary, the place to relax, to have fun, to let loose. And now it's a learning environment where they have to be able to make that distinction. And so when they were at home previously, they may have all these electronics laying around, and they would log on and access. And now we're maybe asking them not to do that so much. So be realistic in understanding that there may be a need for you as a parent to allow your child to have access to some of these devices, but do it in an appropriate manner. Taking breaks will be, of course, important. And here's an example of break cards, where these are ways that your child can let you know, or even their teachers, that they need a break, whether it's for water break, because they're tired, maybe they need a nap. And if so, you as a parent can think about having a way, creating a schedule that allows for maybe some nap time, or the information that you start to realize is that, what, my son or daughter is always tired. Maybe this means I have to change their bedtime, who knows. And then Go Noodle is an activity that's probably more familiar to the kids than yourself, but these are things that in schools kids could go with their teacher's permission, and they do dancing and singing and chanting and whatnot, and it keeps them energized to continue with the day. Here's just ideas again on providing choice, giving them an opportunity to pick the order of the work that is done, what book they get to read, if they're gonna have like an activity that they can do for extra credit. Here's some ideas: drawing pictures, writing a song, a dance. Given the opportunity to choose what it is during break time that they get to do. So something I don't want to forget, important to mention, that When you're giving your children an opportunity to choose, you as the adult obviously have to approve all the choices. And this is what we tell teachers in the classroom. You're going to give them, let's say, 4 choices or 3 choices, whatever it is, and all 3 or 4 are choices that you are okay with. You're just allowing them to pick out of those. But that means that you will never be uncomfortable or have a problem with any of the choices they select, because they have been pre-approved by yourself and your spouse. Something to keep that in mind. And of course, physical activity. I thought this was important. I was thinking about this when I created this, where kids in an elementary world, they have 15 minutes of recess daily. So clearly, we know that it's important for kids to have access to some physical activity. So don't forget that in the house, you want to include that as part of the routine. And then middle school and high school kids, in transitioning from one class to the other, depending on the size of the campus, just walking from one point to the other, that takes up time. So on average, there's about 50 minutes or so of movement. So the idea, again, that you're now at home and they're at home also learning in front of a screen for a prolonged period of time, just keep in mind that they need that break. They need to get up, move, look at something else, and rest their eyes a little bit and their brain. You can go outside for walks, do some games, even scavenger hunts. My daughters love to do dance battles, and so that's something that we do as a family. And of course, I win, but just kidding. But they enjoy to do that, and it's fun as it gets us all moving together. Here's some information about when you're going to allow, if you're going to allow time for electronics, which I encourage. Just keep in mind what it is that they're going to be able to access, which electronic device, because there's a difference between a tablet or a phone and then an actual, like a Nintendo Switch, a little game system. And the difference is that, for example, the game system may be really not the best choice, because maybe the kids, your child may have a hard time ending that activity of playing the Nintendo and going back to learning, depending on when it is that you schedule electronic use. So just keep that in mind. What areas of the house you store the electronics, so that maybe they're not really easily accessible to them, because if it's easily accessible, then it may become a distraction. I've even seen there's like a box that they have with a timer and a lock, and I've seen it like used as a punishment or a consequence for someone who uses their phone a lot. They put it in a box, they turn the timer on, and they put a code, and you can't unlock it till a certain time period. Just an idea. I mean, there's stuff out there that can work, but knowing again where it is in the house, where it is in the learning room that the electronics will be housed, when they can use it, for how long they can use it, what does that look like, what access, what data they can access, whether it's Facebook or not. You want to be in control of all that. At least be aware of that. These are just some generic examples that I found online of what schedules look like. Depending on the age of your group, your kids, they might not want necessarily colorful little pictures. If you're a high school kid, maybe not so much, but still a schedule that's posted would help everyone in the house know the start time, end time, and the length of each of the periods. Remember that at some point, if they haven't done so already, they're going to return to school, and schools follow a schedule, and usually it's posted. So this would be a way to continue what's already been done. The reinforcement system, which is the 4th step, is really important, and this is the way that you ensure that the kids continue to do what's asked of them. If you have been fortunate enough to go into a school when your kids were not in e-learning mode, then you should have seen at some point in the classroom your child's teacher's reinforcement system, and this is how they reinforce the behavior, what they did what they gave the kids for doing the right thing or demonstrating those expected behaviors. Remember that you're going to have these expected behaviors in the expectation matrix somewhere, if not posted in your home, but you're going to refer to them. And so what you're saying is when they do these things, when they meet the expectations, they're able to earn something. By earning something, it's got to be something that they like, and you have to have that system set up so that it will continually do the work of reinforcing that behavior so it becomes learned, and it's something that's repeated. You can have where they earn points for the completion of the assignments, or earn dollars. It could be like what we call a token economy, which is basically like play money, maybe like Monopoly money, and you give them that. Everyone, even adults, like to be reinforced. I myself sometimes use my credit card for Amazon just so that I can get the extra money that I have, the points, the rewards. So even if it's a high school student, they're going to want to be able to earn certain things. It depends on their age what it is that they want to earn, but they'll be able to work towards that. And it's up to you and your child to discuss what it is that works best for them, like have an understanding what their interests are. Using verbal praise works. Of course, you don't have to give them points or dollars or what have you. But my two daughters, for example, one of them, the little one, she works for food. She's kind of like her daddy. She wants to have donuts or pizza and whatnot. So she knows that in our expectations, when she meets the expectations and does her work, at the end of the week, we're able to go out and get her ice cream or buy some good, donuts that will reinforce us asking her to behave accordingly. And then for my older one, she enjoys food too, and that works, but I can simply just verbally praise her and tell her, that I love her, that I'm very proud of her, that I like what she's doing, and it works to reinforce her. It motivates her, that in itself. The examples that I have here, you can see it's very specific to the behavior. So, Bill, I like how you are focused on your reading assignment. That's better than saying, Bill, I like what you're doing. Okay, there's nothing wrong with saying I like what you're doing, but there's not a connection necessarily to the specific behavior of reading assignment being completed properly. Okay, Jess, fabulous work completing your writing journal. Or thanks for starting your work right away, Veronica. If you are able to be specific with your praise, then that's better than just generally saying thank you or I like what you're doing. And of course, when your child finishes, you can always give them a high five or a bump. Just kind of acknowledge and recognize that they have done the work. Very important. This is just information again on the importance of knowing what your child's interest is, because that's what you're going to use to be able to reinforce them. If you know what they like, then you're able to use that towards the reinforcement system. And these are some examples. Now these examples are kind of like academic in nature, so that's really good because you could actually have them do something fun that they may find interesting that's also gets them engaged in some academic learning. You can do TikToks, I guess, videos. I don't have a TikTok account, but I understand you make videos, they're short, they're cute, 10, 15 seconds, whatever it is. And if you're going to do that, please be mindful and monitor maybe what it is you're using or doing, especially if they're teenagers or older. We don't want them to do something that's not appropriate, and so you have to be okay with that. But if it's something they like, maybe that's something that they can earn. They do the expected behavior, and then they earn the ability to make a video using TikTok. Here's an example of what it looks like, or it can look like. So in the case here on the left, you see the schedule. It talks about the different subject areas, right, in highlighted yellow. And each of these areas, when done, when completed, which is the expectation to do this work, your kid earns 1 point. So for this one day that starts from 8 a.m. and it ends at 6 p.m., they're able to get 5 points, provided they've done all those 5 different highlighted yellow areas. And then with those 5 points, they can redeem that. Maybe they have a later bedtime, which is worth 5 points, or 30 minutes of screen time, which is 4 points, and so on. They can do it daily, which is what this example looks like. Or like in my example with my girls at home, they're working for something to get at the end of the week. So in any case, it can work. I would say that if your child is not engage or is having a hard time engaging in the activities, you might want to do it daily first, and then as he or she gets better and it's more compliant, then you can do reinforcement that is redeemed or earned, so that at the end of the week they can get something. And here in this example, the points start each day because they're doing it daily. Okay. Remember, you can change this. This is an example. After I created it, I thought, I don't know about later bedtime, because that may affect the ability to be alert the following day and rested. So I'm not sure that's a great choice, but this is other ideas for you guys. If you're interested, there's free applications you can get on your phones where they help you to reinforce your kids and track the information. This is an example of what we call a token economy, where you have play money and they're earning that. Teachers use this a lot in the classrooms. Even in the middle and high, I've seen some teachers where they do that. It may not look as cutesy and stuff, but there is a system, or they are using an application on the phone that awards points for expected behaviors, and then the kids are able to redeem those. All right, and now the seventh, the more challenging step, number 5, which is, what do you do when your child is not wanting to engage in the learning or is having challenging behaviors? Provided you've done everything else and you have taught and modeled the behaviors, and you know the expectations are clear, for every area or the times of the day. And so, in other words, everything, the system's in place, then you need to then be able to do this following. And that is, the first step is to look at the behavior, right? What it is that the child's doing, your son or daughter, and determine whether the behavior is a mild behavior, if it's a moderate behavior, or a severe behavior. And this is important to distinguish, because based on what it is that the child is doing, it dictates what you do as far as how you respond. So an example in the picture here, you have on the left, for a mild behavior, you have a kiddo that's falling asleep. He's tired, right? So falling asleep and tired is not appropriate. If your teacher or your child's teacher is having a lesson and they're wanting your child to be engaged, falling asleep is not showing a lot of respect. But it's not as bad as if you look on the right side here, maybe a fight going on. So let's say my daughters right now there was a lesson going on. Each of them have their teachers teaching them, and they're on their own devices. All of a sudden they're bickering and fighting, or even physically fighting. That is a lot worse and more severe of a behavior than if they were tired and falling asleep. So I want to be able to know that so that I can address it accordingly. My response to the severe behavior has to be much more firm and strict than a mild behavior like falling asleep, even though both behaviors should be addressed. Okay. Here's a flow chart that can be used to help you follow steps, right, when the misbehavior is happening. Okay, so it goes from left to right. The blue rectangle where it says redirect and reteach, that would be the first thing you do. So if my child's behavior is not what was expected or is expected of them during this time, then I can first do a redirection and then take a few seconds and see, does my child respond properly? If they do, I can correct it, and they correct the behavior, I can recognize that and reinforce them, thank you. If they don't, then I know, okay, I need to do the next step, which would be reminding them of the reinforcement that they're trying to get and earn, and or state what possible consequence may come from them demonstrating that misbehavior, right? From them not meeting my expectations for this time. If when I say this, they correct the behavior, then great, we move on and we acknowledge that and reinforce it. If they don't, then I'm prepared then to take action and have either the loss of time, the loss of privilege that they were trying to get, or a timeout because they did not correct the behavior. So it's simple but yet challenging to do. It does take some time and practice from both parties, the adult and the kids, to kind of understand the way of work. the thing that I can tell you, parents, is you have to remain steadfast on this. When you start and you implement this flowchart, you can't budge and you cannot change it, because then you're teaching, unfortunately, your kids that you're not, they can change things depending on how they respond. And so you don't want to do that. You want to stick to this way of addressing the behavior, and even if it doesn't work properly at first, meaning they don't respond well to it, at some point, if the reinforcement is the appropriate one, or the consequences are the ones that they don't want, it will have the effect that you want, which is to correct the behavior. All right, so this is an example coming up of what it looked like. So the behavior is Gary puts his head down on the table when working online. Right, so the first thing is, I'm going to redirect. Gary, sit properly so that you may face a computer screen. At that point, I've made it very clear what it is that I want him to do. If he corrects the behavior, I say, thank you for doing as I instructed. And we're good to go. If he doesn't respond, then I need to be able to state the possible consequence. Okay? Remember that you're not allowed to sign in to YouTube if your classwork is not completed correctly. By saying this, I'm reminding Gary, like, hey, this is what we agreed upon, that expected behavior needs to be met before you're able to get this YouTube time. If he corrects it, wonderful. I say, thank you for making a good choice. That's it, right? If he doesn't respond, then I can go to the loss of privilege, or the last step, and say something like, since you appear to be tired and can't sit properly to do your work, today you will not be accessing YouTube. We want to make sure you go to bed early in order to have more energy tomorrow to complete your work. This is something that I forgot to say, and I want to say now. Very important. You're addressing your child, your boy or daughter, very calmly, and in a manner that it's not gonna escalate the behavior that they've demonstrated. You want to be in control of that. You're setting an example. Okay. Here's another one. So we have Araceli. She's playing video games on her phone during math lesson. So redirect. Araceli, please put your phone away and focus on the lesson. So we wait a second. She corrects it. Then we say, thank you for following my directions. If she doesn't respond, something like this can follow. If your phone is too tempting for you, I can take it away until you learn to use it responsibly. Okay, now she's very clear on what she's expecting out of her and what can happen if she doesn't do it. If she corrects it, then I say, thank you for putting it away. Okay, if she doesn't, then again, the last step, I will be holding your phone for the rest of the day. Later tonight, we will discuss what you have to do to earn getting your phone back. Okay, no need to argue. I've stated, that's it. If you say something else or respond to any comment that your child has, you may end up creating an argument, and you don't want that. It could be even a shouting match, and that's just not necessary. By stating it calmly, you're very clear on what it is that you want your child to do, and that's all that matters. You just have to then be able to follow up with the action, in this case, taking that phone away. Some things to remember when addressing these situations is that you have to, I said it before, be mindful of your words, your calm demeanor. Your body language is something that is important, because it's critical, because you can be teaching inappropriate behaviors. When I was younger, my grandfather was in the household when I was growing up, and it was interesting because he was completely the opposite of my abuela or my mother, and his body language was more aggressive. His words were not as respectful or kind. So I learned to kind of like push the limits with my mother and my abuela, but at some point, if I knew that they were going to rely on my abuelo to come, then I would stop, because I knew what I was going to get out of him. So just keep that in mind, and know that the language that you use is respectful always. Important, because you want your kids to learn respectful behaviors no matter what the situation is. You praise them frequently, acknowledge what they're doing right, helps them to be reinforced, and encourage them to do the right thing. And de-escalating requires you to be calm to de-escalate. You can't expect to de-escalate and you're shouting or you're raising your voice or being disrespectful to your kids. If you're able to remind your daughter or son, your children during e-learning, what's happening, the transitions and all that, that's wonderful. Sometimes you don't have that ability because you're home working yourself, and you have your own schedules to follow, but it's something that would help. When you don't have that ability, using a timer can help. Their phone, their tablets, their computer screens, it just helps them to know what's coming up and to transition smoothly and quickly. Modeling the behavior is a way of teaching the behavior, and that's important. We tell that to teachers all the time, and we also tell teachers not to assume that the kids already know these things. Behavior, like every other subject area, needs to be taught, and what better time to do it than now that you're potentially being around your kids longer period of time than before while at home learning. So the reference that I made earlier about having like family circles, it doesn't mean you have to literally have a family circle, even though there are such things that go on in certain families. It could be more like what it looks like in my home now and what it did when I was growing up, where we had a time as a family that we came together, and that was really dinner time. One of the few times where everyone in my family was together was dinner time, and the expectations were that we were going to start having our meal, of course, eating, and then we would, as we eat, discuss life and different things that were happening, good or bad, in our daily routine. And so family circles helps to strengthen the family relationship, your norms, your expectations, the self-esteem of your kiddos. I've said this example before. I feel like my self-esteem was strengthened and enhanced by my mother continually telling me I was a smart, handsome young man, and I heard it so much that at some point I started to believe it. Whether it's true or not, it's something that helped me to get confidence in myself and my abilities, and that really stemmed from the different conversations that we would have during our dinner talks. Not that that was the only time that I would hear it, but it certainly was a time that was available to do those things and say those things. Determining the chores that you do, the family, basically everything that your family needs to know can be shared during the family circle or during this family time. When I get home now, my girls are no longer at home learning. They're at brick and mortar. They're going to their respectful schools. And when they get home and with my wife, the first thing I do is I ask them about their day and we celebrate. So they'll tell me, oh, I was, student of the week, or I earned 100 or 80, whatever points on this math quiz. And we recognize that, we celebrate it, and we post it. If there's like a little paper, I'll hang it on the wall so we can display it. And so it's really nice. It works really wonderful for us, and we provide each other for time to teach about life. So there are certain things that my girls cannot learn yet because they're too young. They're 6 and 8, but there are also things that I've gone through that are teachable moments, or things that that I know that based on their age, they're still able to learn from and discuss. So we do those during the dinner table. And even if it's something that it's appropriate for school, it doesn't mean that it cannot be revisited in the home. And so that's an example of family circles. I'm going to leave you guys with this, some possible next steps. Once you've now completed this, you may be asking yourself, well, what can I do? So perhaps you can include family circles if you haven't done so already, or family time in your home. That would be something to think about. Determining if you have all of these 5 steps in place, great. If you don't, what steps are missing? If there are several or all of them are missing, then that's fine. Then implement or do one at a time. Don't try to do everything together at once. If you haven't done so already, see what reinforcement systems may exist in your child's school or in your child's classroom and teacher, and see if you can match that at home. It'd be helpful because then when or if they transition to the school setting, they're familiar with it, and it will be a smooth transition, and they'll be familiar with it as far as knowing how it works. And then as a family, you can decide what activities you want to do for your expectations, or what settings, or what actual core values. If you haven't done that already as a family, you can do that. So again, I just want to thank you for your time today. I hope this information was useful and valuable to you. And my contact information is provided here, raul.garcia@hcps.net. Have a great day. Bye-bye.